Another question that I want to get to, Scott, is that things are coming up in the workplace about marijuana, right? And so you have a trend overall through the country of legalization of marijuana, right?
Yes.
So do you know how many states are legalized, or at least you can get it with a prescription?
If you can, just getting medical marijuana, you're only got 6 states that have completely banned marijuana at all.
Okay.
Which is, so, I mean,
Are those like just super conservative states?
It's Idaho, Kansas, it's Nebraska, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Wyoming. So typically,
Just an outright ban?
Outright ban. You can't have any kind of medical. There's about 7 states that allow medical, but it's only CBD oil. So once again, we're not really talking about those psychoactive substances like the THC. Those are Georgia, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Tennessee, Texas, and Wisconsin. So again, you're looking at
thank you for the graphics, sir.
So again, you're looking at some states that are more conservative. But when you get to medical, I mean, we're talking about 37 states that allow for medical marijuana with THC in it. So a lot of the country has access to some sort of medical marijuana.
So the question then becomes, someone gets a medical card or can legally buy marijuana, all right? They have it in their system. They go to their workplace. They get a random drug test. They fail the drug test. They're terminated. The question becomes, I'm taking that for my glaucoma. I'm taking it for my sleeplessness. I'm taking it for whatever medical condition that they used to obtain, that they used to purchase the marijuana or whatever, get the medical card. How is that right? How is that legal? How is that fair?
Well, I mean, there's some states that have actually started to put in protections for workers that tell employers, hey, you can't test for marijuana anymore. California just did it. It went into effect January 1st. Oregon just upstairs theirs. But there's some other states, Connecticut's another one. But you'd be surprised of the states that don't have protections for their workers. Famously, Colorado's one of the first states to do recreational marijuana. They don't provide that protection to their workers. There was a news reporter who actually got fired for testing for marijuana, and the Colorado Supreme Court upheld it. So it's a state-by-state thing as far as protecting the workers, because it's still illegal federally.
Do you think that, like, part of the issue in marijuana, and I'm remembering this from my old criminal representation days, right? So marijuana stays in your system up to 30 days, right?
It depending on the test.
Depending on the test. It could, like, let's just say your traditional urinalysis test.
Right.
Could stay up, and because it gets in your fat cells, and depending on your metabolic rate and all this, there could be traces of marijuana as much as 30 days. If I went on a vacation and smoked weed.
You went to Colorado. You went skiing. You said, hey, I'm going to go to a dispensary. It's completely legal. You didn't break any laws doing it. You didn't do it while you were at work. In fact, you were on vacation.
Right.
And that's a lot of the argument for people is
2 weeks later.
I didn't break a single law.
Right.
And then you're busting me for something that, right, I wasn't even at work. Whereas usually when they do alcohol testing at work, it's such a short time for you to be over a limit that they actually can tell whether or not you were drunk at work.
Right. So the enforcement is interesting. And so how do you see that playing out, right? So let's say that same example, you went on a ski trip, you had legal marijuana in the mountains. 2 weeks later, you're in Louisiana, and you work for Halliburton. You're offshore. They do a random drug test, and you fail the drug test because you have trace amounts of marijuana in your system.
Well, that's a good example, too, because Halliburton, your oil field companies are the ones that are still testing for sure out there, because there's a lot of safety concerns. You don't want somebody high when you're dealing with heavy machinery. People can get killed. That's a serious thing. So for some companies, I understand why they want to test for it.
Yeah.
But, there's other companies out there. There's a bunch of the big tech companies, right? They don't, Meta, Microsoft, they stop testing for this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's say Chaz Roberts, let's say my law firm. If I want to test people for if they have marijuana in their system, and you can still make the argument that it was 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I say, look, I have a zero tolerance policy.
And you can in the state of Louisiana. You're completely allowed, because that's where we're at right now. We're a state-by-state jurisdiction, whether or not you are allowed to test for it. All the states that still say, hey, you can't test for it in any kind of pre-employment or random testing, still allow for you to fire somebody or demote them if they can be shown to have been high on the job.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Because even, I mean, Amazon stopped testing, but you got to imagine those truck drivers are probably going to still be tested because there's federal regulations around that. But maybe they're not testing all their warehouse workers, and that's there's a potential for some people getting hurt there. But
you're operating forklifts,
right?
You're operating, but then can you treat certain workers differently?
Well, that's part of it too, right? There's some argument it might be under the American with Disabilities Act of you're discriminating against me based on my disability. But we talked about that before. Companies can tell you can't use certain drugs on the job because they're not safe. So even though you may have some kind of disability, they can actually talk to you about which medications are allowed while you're on the job.
Yeah, I had a case one time where I represented this guy who was severely injured on a bike. He was riding his bike and a car collided with him. The police actually put him at fault and said that he made some type of maneuver and go in front of the car.
Right. He had some contributory negligence.
Well, we filed a lawsuit. The driver of the car actually appeared to be impaired, and they did, because there was severe bodily injury, they did a blood test.
Which actually can go back to up to 90 days in some cases.
And he had marijuana in his system, and it had the type of marijuana, and he exhibited some signs of impairment, right? And so even though the defense and the insurance company said, we don't think we did anything wrong, I was still going to make the argument that but for the impairment, he could have potentially stopped in time.
Correct.
Right? And how would a judge look at that? How would a jury look at that? Right? You are giving me something there because you are impaired. And by the way, it's illegal to drive impaired, isn't it?
Correct. It doesn't matter. I mean, even legally prescribed prescription drugs, go read on that bottle. Sometimes it tells you do not operate heavy machinery or drive, right?
Yeah.
If I'm prescribed to Oxycontin, it doesn't mean I get to go drive with it just because I have that prescription.
Right. And if you look at alcohol
has been legal for,
if you're 21 years old.
Other than there was a period of time where it's the one drug we actually have a constitutional amendment that banned it. But it's also the one amendment that we've repealed in our history of the United States. So there's actually two amendments that don't count because they cancel each other out.
And it's the prohibition of alcohol.
18th Amendment prohibited alcohol. Then we passed the 21st Amendment, which repealed that. But it was interesting because when it did that, it left the regulation of alcohol up to the states.
Yeah, wow.
So there's a reason why we don't have any real federal laws around alcohol. In fact, here in Louisiana, remember, it was 18 years old to drink for a very long time.
Right.
And the way they got us to change it was by withholding highway money.
Yeah.
Because the 21st Amendment didn't allow the federal government to regulate alcohol.
Well, we need that federal money.
Yeah. Yeah, our roads, man, were not good. We held out way too long.
They could throw some federal money our way right now.
Oh,
right?
yeah, send it down.
It's amazing when you cross from Louisiana to Texas and you see the quality of roads and the infrastructure, right? Now, part of that is
more tax money coming in,
more tax money coming in, bigger cities, more population, more denser population, but also we are literally in a swamp.
Oh, we had so many bridges, so roads cost so much more to build around here.
And they probably have a lot less shelf life than whenever you get into that rocky area.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Scott, you were talking about